Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Heather Fowler here. I'm looking forward to providing a brief update on the COVID-19 vaccine situation. Now, I'm sure you've probably noticed the media attention shift away from testing sites and now shift into vaccine rollout. So the goal of this presentation is to make sure that we're clear on all of the information that's out there. Now, before I even start, I want to point out that if you go to our website at go.pork.org/COVID-19, you'll find tons of resources as it relates to this vaccine, including a one-pager titled "The 8 Things Our Producers Should Know About the COVID-19 Vaccine" that is summarized in this presentation. I'll be sure to remind you at the end of this presentation where that information lives, and I'll even show you a screenshot. So let's go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. First, you should know there are currently 2 vaccines that are authorized for use or available for use in the United States. They are produced by Pfizer and Moderna, respectively. These 2 vaccines, they both require boosters at 3 to 4 weeks after that first initial shot, and are licensed for adults 16 and up. Pfizer for 16 and older, and Moderna for 18 years and older. Note, Moderna is currently undergoing additional trials to expand that label to young adults between 12 and 18 years old. Both vaccines are extremely effective in the 90% range at preventing symptomatic COVID-19 infection. What that means is the vaccines in general are made in such a way that they want to stimulate the immune system to respond to various components of the virus, of a given pathogen itself, store that information later, that once there is a live introduction of that given bug, that the body can respond to it and prevent symptomatic infection or clinical signs of that disease. In this case, the 2 vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, are mRNA based, which means the mRNA is delivered to the person receiving the vaccine. Their body then changes or translates that mRNA or messenger RNA into a protein, more specifically the spike protein, which is found on the surface of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the virus that causes COVID-19, mounts that response, and again stores it in memory. Next slide, please. Now, keep in mind that there are other vaccines with different modes of action coming down the pipeline. I provided a figure there so that you could see the different types. You notice the orange on the left-hand side there, RNA-based. That was the Pfizer-Moderna vaccine. We have other vaccine candidates that are coming along soon, which is a good thing. And that's because this pandemic, and the name implies, is a globally occurring condition, right? And so that means we want to make sure that we have enough vaccine to vaccinate really everyone worldwide. The good thing about that is that as some of these vaccines are being reviewed and approved by various organizations, is that we have tons of data that we can look at. The bad thing is it's going to split our supply as it relates to the vaccine. So as these other candidates become available, it provides additional vaccines that we can use to get folks here in the United States vaccinated. To orient you on some of those upcoming candidates that we expect to see in the next month or so, there is one from Johnson & Johnson, also one from AstraZeneca, and Novavax. Now, remember, I reminded you that the Moderna vaccine is looking to expand that label to cover young adults, as well as the majority of the vaccines right now only focus on those 16 years and older. The exciting thing about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is that it does not require a booster. So one shot and you're done. So from a logistics standpoint, you don't have to worry about calling folks back and having maybe delayed that booster, etc. I should also point out that the Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca vaccine are considered non-replicating viral vector vaccines. And that means that in this case, adenovirus is the viral vector, or the virus that is used to transport material from the SARS-CoV-2 virus that the body responds to. The non-replicating part just points out that once it gets in the body, it does not replicate. We don't want it replicating. We just want to use it as a courier service to deliver that material that our body can respond to. The Novavax vaccine is a protein subunit vaccine, actually delivers the spike protein directly. Next slide, please. Now, all of this talk about different vaccines that are available and ones coming down the pipeline may have you asking the question, well, are they safe, right? And the answer to that is safety is a top priority. There are actually several organizations and agencies involved throughout the life cycle of the vaccine, as you can see in the slide here, to ensure the overall safety and efficacy of the vaccine. Now, as we move to the tail end of this life cycle and move into vaccine rollout, we continue to monitor for side effects. We know that in general, there are some mild side effects that we expect. They include fever, headache, tiredness, maybe even chills. And that's not due to you coming down with COVID-19. You cannot get COVID-19 disease from these vaccines. They are component vaccines. If you remember from that previous slide, they do not contain live virus, but you can expect to have some of those mild side effects. With that said, if you are someone with a history of having severe allergic reactions to vaccines in general, definitely consult your physician before getting vaccinated. Next slide, please. This last slide contains just some additional information related to the COVID-19 vaccine that you might find of interest. As I mentioned earlier, again, we have a lot of information and resources on our website, and this one pager, which really summarizes information from this entire slide deck, or my section at least, excuse me, as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccine. I also want to point out that there are blue hyperlinks there. I want you to click on those as it takes you to the reference and gives you even more information as it relates to the different facts contained on the document. Just to run through very quickly, I mentioned this already, the vaccines, the currently available ones and those coming down the pipeline cannot give you COVID-19. They do not contain live virus. You should also know that the vaccine itself is free, though there can be, not necessarily will be, but can be an administrative cost related to delivering the vaccine. So just be prepared for that. We are still learning about the duration of immunity as it relates to the vaccine in general. We know that it lasts for at least 6 months, maybe even a year. More data is needed to definitively determine that, and we're collecting that, and we'll let you know when we know more. As it relates to the vaccine itself and what it means for your behaviors should not change even after you're fully vaccinated. You'll have to continue to keep your distance and wear face coverings where appropriate. We want you to consider getting vaccinated even if you've had COVID-19. What we know, though we are still learning about vaccine-initiated immunity, we know that natural immunity that you develop after having live virus in this case, can tend to wane or weaken within 90 days or around that 90-day, 3-month mark. So getting vaccinated definitely has its benefits, even if you've had COVID-19. Now, what I could find is the current recommendations are wait about 90 days post-infection to make sure that natural immunity doesn't interfere as you try to develop additional immunity from the vaccine. Finally, if you have additional questions, again, we have resources available on the go.pork.org/COVID-19 webpage. Your state pork associations are also a reference to you and a resource to you, as well as your local and state health departments. Contact them to figure out when you can get vaccinated, where you should go to get vaccinated, how to pre-register, subscribe for updates, etc. I will be available at the end of this presentation if you have any questions regarding this content. Now I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Dr. KatieRose McCullough, who will cover COVID-19 vaccinations in meat and poultry plants.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Fowler. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys today about something that's near and dear to our hearts here at the Meat Institute, as well as all of our members, which is talking about how we're going to implement the COVID-19 vaccine in meat and poultry plants, a topic I know that is certainly important to all of you. And so Dr. Fowler gave an excellent rehash and discussion of what's going on with the vaccine, what are the scientific and clinical concerns with the vaccine, and those things, certainly all of those really impact what we see going on in meat and poultry plants. And so the question that I have been getting nonstop is something probably similar to what you guys have as well, is how do I get the vaccine? Where can I sign up, and how do I get my employees a vaccine? So I'm hopefully going to be able to give you a good update and outlook of what we're going to see in meat and poultry plants as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccine in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So certainly, I'm sure you guys have seen this many, many times. Right now, we're obviously following the ACIP's guidelines, which is one of the CDC's advisory groups that Heather talked about, reviewed the vaccine safety and made a recommendation of what order the population could get the vaccine. Because right now, of course, we have not enough vaccine for the entire population that we have available. And so we're in the meat and poultry plant, just like you guys are, part of phase 1B, that is persons aged over 75 years old and frontline essential workers. So that includes food and ag, fits inside those frontline essential workers. And of course, the remainder of frontline or essential workers is considered in phase 1C. So we know as of recently, everybody's still pretty much in phase 1A, which is those in long-term care facilities, as well as those that work for healthcare. So doctors and nurses and paramedics and those that are working on patient care. And so last week, as early as last week, Operation Warp Speed, the Health and Human Services Secretary Alan Alzar came in and encourage states to say, hey, it's time. We're ready to transition. It's ready to open up more of the vaccine, to currently not hold that second dose, but go ahead and give it out to more and more people. The second doses will be shipped and available to those who need it in the 3 to 4 weeks, as Dr. Fowler discussed, that those will be available then. So he gave states 2 weeks to really start opening up and allocating more vaccines, and implemented a kind of use it or lose it approach, telling states that if you're not giving out vaccines at the rate that you should be, the federal government will not be giving you vaccines anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes with the upcoming administration transition that we saw occur yesterday. But right now, we're really on the cusp of moving into phase 1B. The only state that I've heard of at this point that's really ready and actively allocating vaccines to those in this phase 1B is in Virginia. Also, it's important to note that this is the federal guidance, putting meat and poultry plant workers along other essential frontline workers in phase 1B. Some states operate a little differently. In the state of Texas, for example, they don't give any sort of allocation based on employment at this time. It is really based on health and different comorbidities. And those comorbidities can lead to more severe COVID-19 illnesses, how they're allocating the vaccine. So you're going to see a little bit of differences, but state by state, which will lead into some of the issues that we're going to see with implementing it in meat and poultry plants. Next slide, please. So I wanted to put this slide up here. This information all comes from the CDC. I think it can help articulate how CDC is estimating how many people fit into each bucket. So we're expecting 30 million once we move into phase 1B of those that fit the frontline essential worker. And you can see food and agriculture is estimated in that 30 million. Of course, this can grow, this can shrink, and it doesn't mean all 30 million will necessarily want to be vaccinated. But I think as you're hearing numbers being thrown around of how many doses are available, what's going on, I think it's important to keep into context the rough estimations of the different buckets of people that we have seen, and keeping in mind that each person within that 30 million, that total of 87 million, will need 2 doses of each of the current vaccines that we do have available. Next slide, please. And so a lot of questions that I'm getting from my members right now and from meat and poultry plants is, when is it going to be our turn? Where can we get the vaccine? When are we going to move beyond the phase of just long-term care facilities and healthcare workers? When is it going to be us? And CDC gives some guidance on that. That is when they talk about the demand in the current phase. So in 1A is less than the vaccination capacity. So the general rule of thumb they gave is when the appointments you have for people to come in and get the COVID-19 vaccine, less than 80% are filled for several days in a row. That's your cue. Then it's time to switch into the next phase. Also, if there's a significant increases in supply, and that could be, more vaccine was able to be allocated to the state. That could be one of the vaccines that Dr. Fowler mentioned has been approved, or we have emergency use authorization. So we know we're going to have a substantially more amount of vaccine available, is going to be another indication of, okay, it's time to move to the next one. As well as most of the persons within the current phase, of course. So this is all direction from the federal government to the states, so or different local areas. So this is if it's going to state of California and LA County, they're saying when the current phase, estimated those in long-term care facilities and in the healthcare community, when 60 to 70% of them have been vaccinated, and you're over that amount, it's time to move into the next phase. So this is the kind of information right now that states have been directed to. Again, with that interesting announcement we saw from Operation Warp Speed last week, saying, hey, it's time to kick it up, it's time to move and start allocating these vaccines more. I think we're going to see this transition we talk about into the phases imminently. Like I said, we've seen a few states starting to take the plunge, and I think within the next week or so, we're going to see it even more. Next slide, please. So how can meat plants get the vaccine? There's really 3 different options that we see the vast majority of meat and poultry plants looking at when it comes to administering the vaccine. First, especially for some of our larger plants that have 4,000 plus employees, they're looking to become an approved vaccine provider. So where they say we have nurses on staff or qualified individuals on staff that can administer the vaccine, and we have the storage capacity. Different states give different guidance to say, here's how you can be an approved vaccine provider. And so we'll see them put together the appropriate plan and documentation to say, hey, I'm ready to handle any the vaccine, the storage of the vaccine, the administering of the vaccine, as well as any potential side effects we may see following the 15 minutes. We've seen some news of having some side effects. We say, hey, we're ready to have that, and they can prove following state recommendations that they are an okay vaccine provider. We're seeing some of the larger plants taking a route that says just give the vaccine directly to us. Second one is where we see some of these plants contract with a local clinic or a different medical provider to come to the worksite to administer the vaccine. So they don't use their current staff, but they say, here's a company that we have been working with. A lot of people have these companies almost on retainer now, because we test many employees often, because we have so many people in the workplace. So they're already on staff, typically for testing purposes and maybe even screening coming in. So we'll just expand the use of those type of people and that type of contract to help us administer the vaccine and come up with a vaccine plan. We'll talk about how important a vaccine schedule and vaccine plan is for meat plants here in the next slide. But again, second option that people is using that local clinic or that contractor to come in and help them out. A third plan, especially for some of the smaller plans, would be to work with their local pharmacy where your employees can go for the vaccine. So they're reaching out to their local Walgreens or their grocery store pharmacy and saying, hey, I'll give you a list of my employees when it's time. And they'll provide proof of who they are, and you'll have the list of mine, especially in a more rural community where there's strong relationship with other companies that work in the area, such as those local pharmacies. They're saying, hey, they're ready, and they're knowing that those pharmacies are part of the vaccine distribution plan set up with the last administration continuing into this administration and CDC. So like I said, these are the 3 ways that we're seeing the plants are aggressively trying to get a hold of vaccines and developing plans on how to get their workforce vaccinated. Next slide, please. So what's the current state of play? I think it's no secret to everyone that there's a lot of vaccine skepticism out there. There's a lot of people that don't trust the approval process or have a lot of concerns of saying, hey, is this vaccine as safe as it should be? There's concerns about the anaphylaxis reaction that we've seen and has been reported, as well as some of the fevers and chills that Dr. Fowler talked about as well. Some people are saying, I'm not sure that this is the type of vaccine that I want. Was this too fast tracked? And so that's really what leads me into my second point, which is the promoting of vaccine positive messaging. We're seeing, and we've seen anecdotally from different members across or different meat and poultry plants across the country, when they've surveyed or gently reached out to their employees and say, how many of you will be willing to get the vaccine? We're seeing some plants reporting saying, oh, only 20% are saying they're willing to, and others saying, 60%. It's so based on culturally the plant makeup, as well as the different beliefs that are held within that community and that plant, of what type of vaccine skepticism you get. So really the enormous focus we're seeing is by flooding plants with this vaccine positive messaging that can help talking about the concerns of the vaccine, as well as addressing different FAQs. How was the vaccine approved? What do I need to do? Am I eligible to get the vaccine? What do I need to be worried about to get the vaccine? I already had COVID-19. Should I get the vaccine? A lot of that type of information we're really flooding into plants right now, and CDC has provided a communications toolkit, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a little while, that can help educate a workforce and address the concerns in an appropriate way to our employees to say, yes, this is, it is appropriate to get the vaccine. Next, we're certainly in the stages of planning. Like I said, we're at this place where we're ready. Any day now, or any within the next coming weeks, we're going to be able to start administering the vaccine to the masses of our employees. And we're looking forward to is, what is exactly that going to look like? Which one of the 3 routes are we going to be able to use? Keeping in mind, of course, that administration won't happen overnight. Currently, when there are potential for side effects, we're not going to be vaccinating an entire plant or even half the plant within one day. We're going to take a series of weeks and administer the vaccine, likely, smaller portions of the population each day, for a couple of reasons. First is there's only so many shots you can put in arms in one day. And second being that you need to certainly watch, and we need to sit there and watch employees after they get the vaccine for 15 or 20 minutes. I can't exactly remember the clinical considerations by both vaccines, to make sure we know if they've had a poor reaction or not, as well as if they do have a reaction or not feeling so well, those employees might have to leave the workplace. And it is important to us that while we're vaccinating employees, if we vaccinate all our employees or 50% of our employees in one day and a large proportion of them go home, we don't want to be in danger of not being able to operate facilities. So we're going to be seeing it will take weeks to get everybody especially in the larger plants, vaccinated, because we don't want to put danger on the supply chain, because it's super important to us. Again, first and foremost is to keep our employees safe, but certainly a second is that we keep the supply chain operating, not just for the health of the plant, but obviously for the health of everyone, and all people like you as well in the supply chain. So there's really a lot of forethought that is going into what makes sense from a scheduling perspective to make sure that we're not alienating a portion of our plant or in danger of not being able to operate. But like I said, the current place we are right now is really by trying to promote these vaccine positive messaging and addressing people's concerns. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about the resources that CDC has available, and they've provided in their Essential Workers Communications Toolkit posters, stickers, flyers, FAQs, slides such as these are slides pulled directly from there that people are actively using, and they're running these on the TVs in the break room. They're posting posters in the as people enter the plant in the break room, as well as in the locker room, to say, hey, here's your questions. Let's talk about this. This is from a reputable CDC source and not necessarily company X. And so here's an example of some of the information that Dr. Fowler covered earlier, but talks about key facts about the COVID-19 vaccine. Next slide, please. And then the last one I have, again, this is where it talks about vaccine safety and how it is a huge priority, and compares the two, which is a lot of the skepticism we see in plants, and not just in plants, but in many around the country. And so this is doing our best to address those concerns head on now, so that when we get access to the vaccine, we're ready to hit the road, and that we are allocating the vaccine to the appropriate subpopulations in our community, because right now it's looking like we need to schedule across different subpopulations, especially those most at need. But another issue that everybody's chewing on right now as well is, can we make the vaccine mandatory in plants, which is also related to, can we make this vaccine mandatory? And we want people to take it voluntary, and part of that is making them feel safe about taking it. So that's certainly a question that's also on top of everybody's mind. But with that, I want to go ahead and pass it off to our back to Pork Board, and look forward to answering your guys' questions about what's going on in meat and poultry plants. Thank you.